Part 64. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 633. Several piles of bonfires were burning in the open space in the middle of the barracks. Soldiers were sitting around the bonfires, and there were barbecues on them. There were not many left, which showed that the party was coming to an end. Several generals sat together. They didn't drink, but their faces were a little gloomy. Chi didn't get too close, but his complexion was also very ugly. He turned around and took the people away and returned to the main road. After resting for a while, he went to the barracks half an hour earlier than usual. He squinted his eyes and looked ahead. Although the scouts moved in a concealed manner, he still found the watchman. Chi was furious and hurried to the barracks. Perhaps it was unexpected that he would arrive early. Although the barracks had been cleaned up, there was still a slight smell of meat and wine in the air. Chi nodded calmly, and said to the generals who came up, "I'll go and see you training in a while." Several generals complained endlessly. During this time Chi energy was focused on the East Camp and West Camp. Why did he transfer to the Central Camp? Chi Ziyuan dispatched 200,000 troops to him. In fact, they were all bandits and rebels mixed together. He asked Chi to train him. After the training, half of them were allocated to suppress the border, and the other half was sent to other places. The most important thing was to send the bandit leaders and rebels who followed him. The leader is trained, because 1,000 troops are easy to get, but a general is hard to find. Now those bandit leaders and rebel leaders are all made generals, and if they are allowed to be so unrestrained and disobedient to orders, is Daki a copycat or a country? Naturally, it is impossible to put 200,000 troops together. The entire south of Canaan is so big. Chi unified and trained them for 2 months, and then divided the army into 3 battalions, the east, the middle, and the west. Tens of thousands are stationed here in Jezhu. He originally thought that the middle battalion was right under his nose, so he only took care of the generals underneath, and wanted to smooth out the east and west battalions first, and then implement their training plan, but now it seems that he is too overestimating. I underestimated the stubbornness of these bandits. Right under his nose, they dared to play so many tricks. What if they were out of his sight? Chi became a little worried, wondering if the East and West battalions also had this problem. After Chi notified them, he entered his middle tent. Fei Bai hurriedly went down to prepare breakfast. The prince ran out early in the morning, and no one had breakfast yet. Several generals hurriedly stopped him and asked in a low voice why the prince came so early today. During the questioning, a banknote was stuffed into his hand. Fei Bai lowered his eyes, put the banknote in his sleeve calmly, looked around, and said, "The prince and the princess had a quarrel. I ran out before dawn, didn't even eat breakfast. I'm in a bad mood these days. Generals, please be careful. Can you? It would be bad for anyone to find themselves being so fooled by subordinates." Several bandit generals also saw the degree of love between the prince and concubine during this period, and they all sighed, and left with their heads drooping. They finally found time to have a brisk night, but they didn't have the chance again. So did the princess. Fight it? Fei Bai came in with breakfast food, took out the banknotes to Chi and whispered what happened just now. Chi said with a calm face, "You can keep the things, and you can take whatever they give you in the future. Personally bring a letter to the princess, and tell her about the matter here. Don't let her reveal the truth. Since there is a quarrel, I will live in the barracks for a few days." Fei Bai hurriedly agreed, and seeing Chi face was not good looking, he withdrew respectfully. Chi complexion was not good all day long. Since Fei Bai had already found a reason for him, he didn't bother to hide it, and went to watch everyone's training with a dark face. Fei Bai just wiped the sweat from his forehead. Fortunately, he was witty and said in advance that the prince and concubine had quarreled, otherwise no one would have discovered it. The generals at the bottom are also wiping off cold sweats. Last night, Everyone had a lot of trouble. The soldiers at the bottom are okay, but the soldiers above Qianzong are all mentally weak. Even they feel a little mentally weak at this time. They didn't feel much after staying up for 3 days and 3 nights, why were they so sleepy after only one night's sleep? The instructions made mistakes one after another, and Chi Heiran's complexion became darker and darker, and he could be compared to the bottom of the pot. In the end, Chi Heiran grabbed the command flag, raised it high in the battle, and shouted, "All soldiers obey the command, divide into 2 battalions, east and west, and practice fighting against each other. The soldiers below are not qualified to participate in the carnival of the chiefs, but they have slacked off a lot during this time, and they have not been focused enough in their drills." Chi Heiran's orders cannot be strictly prohibited, but even so, the West camp under the command of several generals next to him was defeated. Get lost. Now the generals are trembling. Chi Heiran waved his hand and ordered, "All soldiers are led by their respective general banners to practice." He turned his head to look at the generals, and said, "You all come with me." As soon as he entered the middle tent, Chi Heiran's cold eyes fell on their faces. "Do you think this is a cottage, or a military camp?" The hearts of the generals jumped, thinking that they had been discovered. Chi Heiran said furiously, "It's just ordinary training. You can train like this, and when you go to the battlefield, do you intend to fill in the soldiers' lives like stones? What is a general? General, support. But do you see if you are helping them or harming them? This is Qianan, which is the border line between the northwest and southwest borders. In the future, our soldiers will guard the 2 borders and deal with the Miao people. Some rebellion, is this how you train soldiers?" Chi Heiran cursed, "If you don't have the skills, you peel off your skin and go home to farm. I don't have so many lives for you to toss. This is the court, it is the military camp, and the king's salary. Loyalty to the emperor is not a bandit den. If you are happy, you can go out and shoot a cannon, and if you are unhappy, you can live by guarding the gold and silver treasures. You want to protect your family and the people, not just for your own happiness." Chi Heiran couldn't help but explode. Grandmas. If it weren't for the fear of chaos in the military camp, according to his previous temper, these people would be dismissed and investigated even if they didn't die. But these are the bandit leaders and rebel leaders who took refuge here. Although the 200,000 troops were dispersed, they were all like this. Chi Heiran was not sure that he would kill the soldiers under them to prevent chaos. This tone can only be endured temporarily. Although the general standing below was not convinced, he didn't dare to tell the difference at this time. Chi Heiran saw them bowing their heads and not talking, but their backs were straight and stubborn, and he was even more angry. A faint light flashed in his eyes, and he smiled on his face. "Do you think the military camp is boring? Not as good as yours. Is the cottage fun? Pass the order down, and the whole army will open the arena. Before, the master taught you how to train soldiers in the barracks. Today, the master will teach you how we usually play." The intuitions of the generals were wrong, but at this time there was an idiot who answered yes loudly, and the idiot laughed loudly and said, "General, I feel so bored to death. I used to go down the mountain from time to time when I was in the cottage. No, there are girls playing with us. It's not like now. I can only stay in the barracks, and I can only go home every few days. I'm almost sick from boredom." Chi Heiran smiled, and his voice suddenly became soft. "Don't worry, I won't let you guys get bored again this time. No matter how stupid a fool is, he will notice something is wrong." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 634. The whole middle camp was full of complaints. When everyone heard that there was a ring, everyone happily came to join in the fun, but the prince only sent half of his own guards and turned everyone into dogs. Not to mention, the few generals who directly fought against the prince were not enough for him to move his muscles. After all, Chi Heiran has practiced martial arts since he was a child, and these bandits are all monks halfway through, so naturally they are not as good as him, even if they were the boss. At this moment, everyone was tortured and put down by Chi Heiran. If it was the past, Chi Heiran would let it go with a smile when he knocked someone down, but he was getting angry, and after he knocked him down, he taunted him, "You guys still dare to go to the battlefield like this? You will also be powerless. The ordinary people in China can still show off their prestige, but if you really encounter Jin soldiers or Xixia soldiers, 10 of your heads will not dare to cut off." How docile is the person who can become a bandit leader? As soon as these words came out, everyone was instantly angered. He wanted to lie down and pretend to be dead, but now he was about to get up again. Chi Heiran continued to abuse them until they were speechless, and the anger in his heart dissipated. This incident alarmed Fan Zijian. Fan Zijian took the time to walk over at noon, and when Chi Heiran stepped down, he wandered back to the camp behind him. "Why did my brother and sister send your food to me? Are you really arguing? Since she both I've given you food, it's considered resigned, so you should forgive her a lot." "Who said I quarreled with Aling? She listens to me in everything. We are fine as a husband and wife. There is nothing to argue about." "Yo, I misunderstood." Fan Zijian looked at him with his eyelids lifted, sat with his head propped up and looked at him, and asked, "Then why are you annoyed?" As for implicating the entire army, Chi Heiran became angry, and told him about the accidental discovery. "I always thought that the discipline in the middle camp was not bad, so I lived in the city with peace of mind, but now it seems that they are doing it for us to see. It's time to have fun at night. I'm going to the military parade." "Grandmas, the military training in the past 2 months was for nothing. I haven't watched it for a few days. Everyone is relaxed." Fan Zijian frowned. "Gathering late at night, don't you have evil intentions?" Chi Heiran waved his hand and said, "I have already asked someone to investigate. It is the people below who have put their minds to it, thinking that the discipline is too strict." Fan Zijian breathed a sigh of relief, "But they don't listen to orders at this time, and they will rebel if there is an accident in the future." Chi Heiran nodded. "There are a lot of people in the middle camp, so I want to discipline them first, and then clean up the east and west camps, but I can't let it go like this. First call Lu Dehei and the others, and find something for them to do. Otherwise there will be chaos. But at this time, there are no battles at the border, and they can't take the initiative to start a war. It's called training and they are lazy. What can they do?" Chi Heiran was distressed. Just as Mu Yangling got Chi Heiran's Lushan, she went to the field to have a look. The previously contiguous piece of land had been divided into many pieces. Su Ji asked them to take them to see their land, and Chi Heiran could still divide it into pieces. "To 3 mountains." Mu Yangling asked, "Can these 3 mountains build terraced fields?" Su Ji was silent for a while, then shook his head and said, "It's difficult." Mu Yangling understood. "No, it's just an understatement." Mu Yangling looked at the 3 mountains, then turned to Zhu Liang and said, "Go back and ask the old farmer to go up the mountain to see what is suitable for planting on it." Su Ji waited for Zhu Liang to step back before asking, "What does the princess plan to plant on these fields?" Seeing that Mu Yangling seemed very interested in farming, he couldn't help but want to ask. Mu Yangling asked with a smile, "Does Master Su have any suggestions?" Su Ji thought for a while and said, "Buckwheat is a good choice." "Buckwheat is not a very tasty food." Mu Yangling raised his eyebrows. Su Ji hurriedly said, "There are 2 fields with good fertility and water and soil, which can be used to grow rice, but it is difficult to grow rice in other places. The weather is a bit abnormal in winter this year, and I don't know what it will be like next year." Mu Yangling pondered. "It's the end of autumn this year, and the weather is still a bit stuffy. Seeing that winter is about to begin, the temperature began to drop slowly." Mu Yangling originally thought that it was because of the high mountains around here, but now it seems that the situation abnormal indeed. When Mu Yangling returned to the mansion, he found Zhu Liang, and said, the corn planted in Jiangnan this year is being harvested, right? Ask Wan Quan to buy as much as possible, pick out the ones that can be used as seeds, and store some in each branch, and the rest bring it to Qianan, and then write to Baidi, asking them to bring over more seeds of dry rice. No one. Princess, how will Lushan be distributed next year? First ask someone to look at each piece of land, and divide the upper, middle, lower, and drought and flood, and I will make a choice later. Zhu Liang wrote them down one by one, and when the two of them finished speaking, Li Chun came in from the outside to report, Princess, Mrs. Chen and Miss Jinhua from Miao village are here. Han Lan, Mu Yangling tilted his head, waved Zhu Liang back, and said, let them in. Han Lan came to deliver clothes to Little Bear, and Mu Yangling smiled and said, thank you for your trouble, the last time you sent him clothes, he hasn't worn much yet. Han Lan smiled and said, it's just a little thought from us. We don't have any good things in Miao village, and only this little fabric can be sold. That's why you are being modest. I heard that the medicinal materials in your Miao village are also very good. Isn't the general planning to let you grow medicinal materials? Han Lan said with a wry smile, this medicinal material is not so easy to grow. We Miao people have always dug wild medicinal materials, and no one has ever planted them, so no one dares to do it, and this thing is used for curing diseases. Who is okay? Do you eat it often? Han Lan paused for a moment, then said with a smile, I heard that the concubine knows a kind of fetish, the yield is very high, and the common people can fill their stomachs. I heard that planting has begun in the Jiangnan area. Mu Yangling was taken aback, and asked, you mean corn? Han Lan nodded again and again, expectancy flashed in her eyes, I heard that the thing is so long, it doesn't pick the ground, and the yield is high, please have mercy on the princess. Mu Yangling smiled and said, that thing is not as good as you think, but the yield is indeed higher than that of rice and wheat. If the top-notch land is well served, God will reward him. It shouldn't be 500 or 600 caddies per mu. The problem is, there are about 300 caddies in the lower places. Han Lan couldn't help getting excited. Their Miao people are not very good at farming. 1 mu of high-quality land can harvest 300 caddies of grain a year. Better. At least we can have more staple food. Han Lan looked at Mu Yangling with piercing eyes. Mu Yangling didn't use this to negotiate conditions with them, but said, the seeds should be delivered before the spring, and I will open grain shops in 2 or 3 places in southern Guizhou. If you want to buy them, you can bring your household registration and land deeds, just buy it. Han Lan hesitated, I don't know the price. It won't be very expensive. If you don't have any money, you can still pay on credit. You can pay it back when it's harvested. There will be someone responsible for it. Mrs. Chen can rest assured. Han Lan breathed a sigh of relief. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 635. Han Lan came here this time for the seeds, and when she got the reply she wanted, she pulled Jinhua and wanted to say goodbye. But Jinhua didn't want to leave. She grew up so big that she only went down the mountain 3 times, and each time she came and went on the same day. She could only hang around in the street, so she wanted to stay. She always said what she wanted, so she said directly to Mu Yangling, I don't want to leave, I want to live in your house, and I will go back after I have had enough fun. Mu Yangling didn't like her, so he refused, Miss Jinhua, we just moved here not long ago, and the house is still in chaos. What's more, this house is not ours, it is rented by someone else's house, and there is not even a guest room. I'm afraid I can't keep you here. Jinhua pouted unhappily, we Miao people are warm and hospitable, why are you Han people so stingy? You can't even stay for a few days. But Han Lan knew that the Chi family might not have any guest rooms, but that they were unwilling to keep guests. After all, her sister wanted to compete with Mu Yangling for the prince. She was afraid that she would embarrass her sister if she continued talking, so she quickly stopped her and said, "Before you came out, you promised Dad that you would listen to me and go home early. Why did you forget? If you want to play, next time we go to the city to play." "No," Jinhua refused to leave. "You guys said the same thing before, but I've grown up so much, but I've only been to the city 3 times, so I'm going to stay here." Mu Yangling sat still and did not speak. Han Lan pulled her away and said in a low voice, in front of the concubine, "You should be more cautious in your words, so as not to be laughed at. Go back with me first and then talk." Seeing that the servants in the room were all looking at her, Jinhua's face was ashamed and annoyed, her eyes turned red, and she pointed at Mu Yangling and shouted, "Isn't it just to pursue the prince? You are too narrow-minded, our Miao family girl. As long as you like it, you can chase it. It's a skill to chase it. If you can't catch up with your rival, you are also a good sister. How can you be stingy like you Han people? Last time you came to our Miao village, you asked me to learn Miao language. Well, I didn't tell you not to teach you." Seeing her arguing with her like a primary school student, Mu Yangling was very helpless. Thinking that she was indeed used last time, Mu Yangling thought for a while and said, "Rivals can indeed become friends, but I don't think we are rival in love. You can also pursue any unmarried man, but you have to know that the prince has already married a wife and had children, and for this alone, he should be removed from your pursuit list, because he does not meet the conditions. You go after him, he is not in love, but destroying my family, so I don't like you." Han Lan was surprised. She didn't expect this princess to be so straightforward. She was slightly annoyed, but she saw her sister slightly tilted her head and asked, "Then you asked me to teach you Miao language last time? Because you were the only one who could speak Chinese and Miao at that time," Mu Yangling said. "If you ask me any questions, I will answer them bluntly. Although I don't like you, I won't target you in other matters." Jinhua rolled her eyes and said, "Are you serious?" Mu Yangling nodded. "Then let me ask you, do you have many strong men under your husband's command?" "Golden Flower," Han Lan stopped her angrily. Jinhua said dissatisfied, "Sister, I think you are stupid to follow your brother-in-law to study. We Miao girls dare to love and hate, what can we not say? I don't like your twisted and entangled look. If I didn't know that you are the biological daughter of my father and mother, I would doubt whether you are my sister." Jinhua pointed to Mu Yangling and said, "She looks more like our Miao girl than you." The veins on Mu Yangling's forehead twitched, and he said, "I think I'm more like a Han Chinese." Jinhua snorted, and asked, "Just tell me, is there any strong man, preferably stronger than the prince? It's okay to have a wife, but you have to be pretty and have good kung fu." Jinhua thought for a while, and said, "It's okay to have a dead wife, even if you don't have a wife." Mu Yangling /U0026 Han Lan. It took Mu Yangling a long time to recover his voice. "Does your father know what you mean?" "Of course he knows." Jinhua proudly raised her head and said, "My father promised me a long time ago that he would find me the strongest man in the future, but unfortunately our cottage is too small, and I will look at every man in it, not on." "What about the other Miao villages?" Han Lan couldn't stop her, and Jinhua said disdainfully, "I don't like theirs, not to mention that Dad is not willing to marry me to another village." "Jinhua," Han Lan interrupted her with a cold face, and said, "Let's leave it to Dad to find my husband. Let's go back first. What can you see by yourself?" "My husband, of course I want to choose." Jinhua jumped up and said, "My father and mother don't object. What do you object to? I think you have learned from your brother-in-law and pay attention to the Han people. Those are all bad words. I told you not to listen to them a long time ago. You still know if the shoes fit or not." Han Lan had a headache, turned her head to Mu Yangling and said, "The princess is laughing, I'll take my younger sister home first." Han Lan stepped forward and grabbed Jin Hua, covered her mouth and dragged her away, obviously no longer intending to estimate her image. Mu Yangling was stunned. She didn't expect that Han Lan, who looked soft and weak, had stronger strength and kung fu than Jin Hua, and she dragged her out overwhelmingly, even though her face, hands, and neck were also covered by Jin Hua. Flower scratched. It took a long time for Li Shun to find his own voice. "Meow, girls are really tough." Mu Yang nodded with sympathy, turned his head for a while and said, "Go to Xiaoting and ask him to list for me the list of unmarried, majestic men under the general's command." Class. Li Shun went down immediately. In the evening, Xiaoting sent in a list, which was very detailed, and everyone's grade, age, family situation, and general personality were written on it. Because of the limited condition of ranking, Xiaoting sent up a list of 5 rank captains and above, ranging in age from 19 to 40 years old. Seeing that a 42-year-old general was also among them, Mu Yangling twitched the corner of his mouth and asked, "Is this one not married?" Xiaoting took a look with his head, and immediately replied, "Princess Hui, this one is indeed unmarried. He used to be a tenant of the landlord's family. He only had a handful of strength. Because he had no money, he never married a wife. Later, he encountered natural and man-made disasters. If he can't survive, he will go up the mountain and become a bandit. He is the second in command of their cottage. He was directly recruited by the emperor at the beginning, so he was a general from the 3rd rank when he came up. He is also in a hurry to find a wife, but everyone heard that he at my age, and because I am a soldier, girls from good families are not very happy." Mu Yangling frowned and said, "But he is a general of the 3rd rank." Xiaoting chuckled, and quickly explained, 3rd rank generals are valuable in Jiangnan and Baidi, and they are not popular here at all. They have power in Jiangnan, and they don't have to work hard on the battlefield. There is a large piece of Lushan in Baidi. In the battlefield of death, according to the usual practice, Lushan can be kept for 3 more years, and there will be a lot of promise in those 3 years. But here, you can also see that the prince is a 2nd rank general, and he can only get a little bit of Lushan, let alone a 3rd rank general. Baron, because he was raised from a bandit, he is very poor and has no family background. Here is the border, who knows when he will fight with Zixia. If he dies, the whole family can only drink northwest wind, so no one is willing to marry him, and those who are willing to marry are widows with children, and he is not willing to raise a son for others, so he has been procrastinating. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 636. So Chi Heiran still has a large group of bachelors who are difficult to get married under? Mu Yangling looked through the thick roster, and saw Lu Dehei's name on the first line above. Forget about Lu Dehei, why is Lin Man on it? I remember that he has a room full of concubines. Although there are concubines in a room, they don't have wives. Xiaoting asked hesitantly, should those who have concubines also be eliminated? Mu Yangling thought of Jin Hua's temper, and thought that in order not to harm those girls, it's better to get rid of them. Fortunately, everyone's general family situation and visible personality were written on it. Mu Yangling picked up a pen and crossed out all the concubines, then frowned and looked at the rest of the young and old. Mu Yangling took out the vermilion pen again, and crossed out those who were older than 30. The remaining men were all between 19 and 29 years old, but the golden flower was only 16. Mu Yangling's goal was to let go on the youngest ones. I don't know if Jinhua can take a fancy to it. Mu Yangling was just about to find a time to go to the barracks to ask Chi Heiran what he meant, but Chi Heiran sneaked back at noon the next day, and when he saw the surprised Mu Yangling, he explained, I'll come back to see the little bear. Little Bear would have protested if he had heard it, for he had only watched him quietly by his crib for a while, and then went to his mother's room without even kissing him. Mu Yangling saw that his beard was unshaven and his body smelled of sweat, so he hurriedly ordered Li Shun to go down and prepare hot water. Qi Heiran was very upset. It's rare for me to come back, so you notice that I didn't take a shower. Seeing that he was not in a good mood, Mu Yangling coaxed him, you are healthy only when you are clean. Am I thinking about your health? Qi Heiran doubted, didn't you dislike me? No. Mu Yangling leaned forward and kissed him on the cheek. Only then was Qi Heiran satisfied, grabbed his wife over, leaned over to hold her lips, and kissed him for a while before letting go. Seeing his frown, Mu Yangling stroked his brow and asked, have you had lunch yet? I asked Xiaoting to bring you your favorite braised pork today. No, Qi Heiran said, I wasn't in the military camp, I took those little bastards out for practice, and I came back directly from the mountain depression, so now he is so hungry that his chest is on his back. Seeing that Qi Heiran had some snacks, he stretched out his hand to eat them. Mu Yangling hurriedly slapped his hands off, and said, it won't be easy to eat after a while. Wait, we only had lunch not long ago, the kitchen, there's still something in there, I'll ask someone to get some up for you. Guyu outside heard it and hurried down to give orders. As soon as the cook heard that the Lord was going to eat lunch, she quickly messed with the leftover dishes at noon, and quickly put the ingredients for the evening into the pot. In less than 2/4 of an hour, a table of medium-sized meals was prepared. Guyu led people to bring things into the main house, while Mu Yangling was helping Qi Heiran take a bath in the bathroom, almost scraping off a layer of his skin. She decided to talk to Fei Bai later, although it is not easy to take a bath in the military camp, but it must be done every 2 or 3 days. Qi Heiran hasn't washed since he left home, right? After taking a shower, Qi Heiran sat on the kong with his hair loose, and pointed to Mu Yangling to feed her. Mu Yangling rolled his eyes and said, you are so good. Master is tired. Qi Heiran didn't want to move. Mu Yangling had no choice but to pick up the bowls and chopsticks to feed him. When he was half full and not in such a hurry, he asked, what happened in the barracks? Qi Heiran didn't speak, and Mu Yangling stopped asking. After he was full, Qi Heiran hugged Mu Yangling in frustration, buried his head in her neck, and said, training these bastards is more difficult than I imagined. It can be said that Qi Heiran has suffered a lot in the past few days. These soldiers are not new recruits, nor are they veterans who have been on the battlefield. He has independently led an army to train soldiers since he was 12 years old, and he has trained many soldiers over the years. Today, 1/5 of the most elite troops in Daki used to be under his command, but those are newly recruited soldiers, are easy to practice, or veterans who have survived the battlefield. Although they are veterans, they are easy to train as long as they find something, but Qi Heiran finds it difficult to meet these soldiers who have been bandits for several years and have hard to change bad habits. It's not that you can't practice, but it takes too much energy and time. Mu Yangling patted him on the shoulder, and said softly, you are too anxious, there is nothing wrong with slowing down. How can it be slow? The kingdom of Jin and Xixia are staring at each other. I'm afraid that our soldiers will go to war again before they are trained. By then, won't these little bastards die when they go to the battlefield? Qi Heiran dare not say that he loves soldiers like children, but he also regards them as his own responsibility. As long as he thinks about them, his heart hurts, and then his anger starts to rise. We have to find a way to suppress their temperament. Then drill them to death, run out of strength, and they still have the mood to fight against you, Mu Yangling said. At that time, if you do ideological work, you will be able to subdue them in a long time. Qi Heiran said, that's what I do now, but this group of boys are full of energy, training to death during the day, and screaming vigorously at night, and after a few days, they will continue to make small movements. Otherwise, he would not will be so distressed. Is there too much oil? This was the only reason Mu Yangling could think of. Qi Heiran nodded, but we can't reduce the food and pay. We rely on this to stabilize people's hearts and keep people. He looked at Mu Yangling eagerly, and said, do you have any way to waste your strength and energy? Tell me quickly. Mu Yangling pondered, and said, actually, I wanted to discuss with you a few days ago. The climate in southern Guizhou is a bit abnormal this year. I don't know whether it will be drought or flood next year, or whether the weather will be smooth. Most of the water conservancy in various places is now paralyzed. Taking advantage of winter, there are few people in Qianan, and I don't know if the military camp can help. Qi Heiran frowned, is the government office rich? The construction of water conservancy does not only require labor, but also requires a lot of money. Among other things, tools and materials are not a small expense. Mu Yangling smiled and said, Mr. Lu has to worry about this. Qi Heiran immediately said, that's no problem, I can take care of enough people, since it is going to be repaired, the whole area of Qianan will be moved. Qi Heiran's eyes flashed, and he said, except for Guizhou, Qianan there are still 2 state capitals, and their prefects have not changed, so it is time for them to contribute money and strength. Qi Heiran suddenly had a calculation in his heart. Mu Yangling pursed his lips and smiled, and asked, do you want to contribute to Miao village? Qi Heiran frowned, they also have to do hard labor, why do you ask that? I'm talking about whether to hand over the Miao people to the management of the chiefs of the Miao villages. If the Miao people are managed by the Miao people, the conflicts will be much less. Although some benefits will be conceded on the surface, the actual effect should not be as good as that of the imperial court. The officials directly direct Miao Min Xiao, and I heard that some accidents happen every year when Miao people are forced to perform hard labor. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 637. In this way, the authority will undoubtedly be delegated to the Miao village. Although the 2 sides can be friendly temporarily, conflicts will inevitably increase due to interests later on. I'll discuss it with Mr. Lu later. Mu Yangling took out the roster, explained what Jinhua meant, and asked, what do you think will happen when Miao and Han marry? Qi Heiran curled his lips, flipped through the list, and asked, will masters people like Miao girls? Or Miao girls like Jinhua? Miao people are very accepting of free love. If it's okay, just let them get in touch. They are a group of old men. If you don't like it, you can refuse it. There is only one thing. Don't pretend to like it if you don't like it. When you turn around, you will beat it up in the concubine's room if you pull them home. That's not getting married, it's making enemies. Qi Heiran touched his chin and nodded, not sure if he listened or not, but he brought the list with him when he left. Qi Heiran went through the list, and finally selected 6 trustworthy and active subordinates. When they came out of the main account, all 6 of them had strange expressions on their faces. Several generals in the middle battalion saw it, and their faces were a little dark. One of them said, my lord has been moving a lot lately, shouldn't he know what we are doing in private? Otherwise, he would find so many people from the East Camp and the West Camp. What is the general doing? Didn't we also go to 2 camps? How can it be compared? Those 2 boys are still young, and one of them is just a captain. That Lu Dehe from Xieying is here. Su Shenjiang's face also darkened slightly, and then he turned his smiling face away, stepped forward, and pulled the bitter-faced Colonel Zhong over, and the 2 brothers hugged his neck and asked, little Zhong, what is the prince looking for, what's the matter with you? Okay, this is going to be a big success. Lieutenant Zhong looked up and saw that they were all the generals of the Central Battalion, and they were all famous prickly heads. His heart skipped a beat. He was not stupid. His face was blushing, and he whispered, brothers, stop making fun of me. Hey, I'm sorry, tell me, what's the good thing? Xiao Yi Zhong twitched a bit, and then said in a low voice, the prince said that the princess wants to marry us, and the good things of other unmarried brothers in the camp should not be far away. General Su was startled, and hurriedly asked, "Which family are you talking about?" The expression on Xiao Yizhong's face was a bit embarrassed. He kept his mouth shut and refused to speak. Several people laughed, slapped him on the shoulder one after another, and asked, "Lu Dehe and the others also did this?" Captain Zhou nodded. General Su immediately lowered his eyes and pondered. Lu Dehe is not young, and he is considered one of the most trusted people of the prince. It is understandable to say kiss to him, but I don't know whose daughter he is talking about. Or, the maid beside the princess? Although marrying the maid next to the princess as the main or concubine is somewhat flattering, but if you can talk to the princess, you can bear it and pass it. You know, the prince and the concubine have a good relationship and have been married for many years, but up to now they don't even have a roommate. Su Shenjiang thought about it, and when he looked at Xiao Yizhong again, his eyes were not so heavy. After all, he was young, and he still couldn't hide his face. He just blindly loved ladies with good status, but he didn't know that marrying a wife would be helpful to him is the best. After everyone left, Zhong Xiaoyi found someone who was not paying attention and slipped over to see Qi Heiran. Qi Heiran raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect that Captain Zhong would be the first to see him. He thought it was Lu Dehe. It seems that he also misjudged people sometimes. Xiao Yizhong blushed under Qi Heiran's half-smile gaze, and he talked about what happened just now. Under the corner of Qi Heiran's smiling mouth, a glint flashed in his eyes, and he raised his head after a while. She smiled and said, "It's okay, but if they ask who it is, don't tell them, lest the marriage fail, and it will embarrass Miss Jian." Xiao Yizhong nodded repeatedly. "I know that reputation is very important to girls, so I didn't say a word." Qi Heiran was satisfied, and asked curiously, "Then are you willing?" Xiao Yizhong stopped talking again, and Qi Heiran understood that he didn't like Miao Nu. He loved Mu Yangling, so he knew that such things should not be forced, so he waved his hands and smiled, "It's okay, you go down." Xiao Yizhong retreated, and just opened the curtain to meet Lu Dehe face to face. Lu Dehe cursed secretly in his heart. The waves behind the Yangtze River push forward the waves ahead, but Xiao Xiaozhong didn't think much, and directly bowed his hands and retreated. When Qi Heiran saw Lu Dehe, he felt that this was the right thing to do. He propped his head up and looked at him. Lu Dehe rubbed his nose in embarrassment, then sat down beside Qi Heiran in an instant, and said with a smile, "My lord, we are brothers, aren't we?" Qi Heiran reluctantly nodded because of the fact that the two had fought side by side. "Then will you help the old brother?" Thinking of Lu Dehe's personality, Qi Heiran reluctantly nodded his head. Lu Dehe vomited bitterly instantly. "Brother, you also know that I am alone, old brother, and I don't have any relatives to help me. It's past 30, and I don't have a daughter-in-law now. I didn't think so in the military camp before. When you mentioned it today, I just realized that I am not as good as a dog. Although this Miao girl is not as gentle and demure as a Han girl, I like aggressive ones. Can you do me a favor first? Have you seen Miss Najian?" Qi Heiran looked embarrassed, and said, "I haven't mentioned this matter to Chief Jian yet." Lu Dehe slowly sat up straight, and looked at Qi Heiran with a little accusation. Qi Heiran just laughed, then restrained his smile and said, "I really want to marry the Miao village. Jian loves his young daughter very much. If we can have him in various Miao villages, within 10 years, we can at least marry the Miao village. We are safe and sound, and put all our energy on the border." Qi Heiran pointedly said, "It is impossible for me to stay in Qianan for a long time, at least 3 or 2 years, and at most 5 or 6 years, I will return to Beijing and be transferred. At that time, Qianan must leave a general to guard the southwest and northwest borders." Lu Dehe's heart skipped a beat. Knowing that what he wanted came true, his mouth became dry for a moment. He looked at Qi Heiran with piercing eyes, and Chi Heiran smiled slightly. I am interested in you, big brother Lu. The group of people I have now are all bandits and rebels. There are many people who disobey discipline. We brothers are considered. There are more cooperations, and the love is different from others, but whether you can take on this burden depends on your ability. Lu Dehe lowered his eyes to think, and Chi Heiran reminded him, Chief Jian's youngest daughter is a temperamental person, and we want to get married, not enmity. So Lu Dehe can use means to seduce the other party, but he must not use force or use that kind of indecent trick. Lu Dehe coughed twice, and left. As soon as he came out, he turned around and went to look for Fei Bai. He stuffed all the valuables on his body into Fei Bai, and said in a low voice, Brother Fei Bai, you have to help big brother. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 638. Fei Bai put away all his things, and said with a smile, it's easy to say, easy to say. Lu Dehe knew there was something going on, so he just said it. The prince had talked to him so much, how could he not give him some other news? Fei Bai said in a low voice, Miss Jian is straightforward and likes, majestic man. Fei Bai glanced at him suggestively, and then said, General Lu Shen, this girl is easy to coax sometimes, maybe it's just a small thing that can make people's hearts flutter. Fei Bai emphasized emphatically, it doesn't need to be expensive. Lu Dehe became distressed. He is tall and majestic, and he thinks there is nothing wrong with him. He was able to become a bandit leader from a farmer in a certain land because of his big body and strength, but, brother Fei Bai, you also know that I have been exposed to the wind and the sun for many years. Yes, this face is as black as the name. This little girl loves handsome young people, that Captain Zhong from the middle camp. Although Captain Zhong is not a badass, he has two advantages that he can't catch up with. First, Captain Zhong is young enough. He is 21 years old, much younger than the 30-year-old Bark Up. The second is that although Xiao Ei Zhong is not a handsome guy, he has a handsome face. He is considered the best among them. Something went wrong, so Lu Dehe hoped to go through the back door and get in touch with that Jian girl in advance, so as to make a good impression in the other party's heart first. Fei Bai wondered, General Lu Can, that girl Jian is very favored and doesn't come out of the Miao village easily. Why did you see her? If you want me to say, you should listen to the prince. When Miss Jian comes over that day, you should show as much as possible the side she likes, Fei Bai said against his will, at least you know her preferences before they do. Lu Dehe looked at him resentfully, the hardware is so bad, it is useless no matter how good the software is, anyone with a little sense knows how to choose. Fei Bai looked away guiltily. Lu Dehe can only go to Lin Man for advice. This kid has many concubines and is very popular in brothels. He is good at coaxing women. Since the hardware is no longer good, he can only hope that the software will be perfect, saying maybe Miss Jian just had a brain twitch. Lin Man widened his eyes and said, are you really planning to marry Miao girl? Speak softly, I only told you about this, the prince won't let us talk about it. Lin Man curled his lips, I won't say it, but the Miao girl is too tough. I heard that their chief doesn't even have a concubine room. Do you really plan to never take a concubine for the rest of your life? Lin Man shook his body and said, fortunately, the prince didn't look for me. Lu Dehe snorted and said, I think the reason why the Lord didn't look for you is because he knows your flirtatious nature. We are going to get married, not to make enemies. Lu Dehe kicked him with his toe, and said, quickly tell me, is there any way to please a woman? Simple. Lin Man stretched out a finger, and said, one word, money. As long as you have money, if you smash it hard, you can pry it open no matter how fierce the girl is. Lu Dehe didn't believe it. Do you think she is one of your fans? Her father is the chief of Miao village, and he is not short of money. Lin Man curled his lips. She is not short of money, because she has never used it, and I didn't ask you to give her the money directly. How unattractive is that? I asked you to spend money to buy jewelry and clothing materials. There is nothing for these things. Women don't love. If you don't believe me, if you give him a set of ruby jewelry as soon as you meet, she will definitely rush into your arms. Lu Dehe turned around and left with a dark face. He felt that it was a wrong choice for him to come to Lin Man. He would give ruby jewelry as soon as they met. If you give him valuable things, he must suspect that there is something wrong with that person's heart. Fei Bai lowered his head and replied, only Lu Shenjiang came to inquire about the news with Xiao. Qi Heiran waved him back, turned his head and said to Fan Zijin, so I like to use Lu Dehe. Although he has never studied, he is very smart. No one in the three armies can match him. Credible. Qi Heiran nodded. He has no father or mother, and he doesn't even have a family. If he wants to climb up, he can only rely on Zhen. Such a person is the most reassuring. Apart from getting closer to Lin Man, he has no relationship with other generals. Ping Ping, as long as the eldest brother shows a little favor, he will not form a clique for personal gain. People like Lu Dehe are ambitious, capable, and smart enough. They have no family history, no contacts in the court, and they are the most reassuring to use. The point is, this man is ruthless, but he has a sense of loyalty. Back then, he and Lin Man met by chance and happened to besiege Qi Heiran together, but they were able to help each other all the time. Seeing that Qi Heiran had such a high opinion of him, Fan Zijin took it easy and asked, then you are interested in him? What if Jian's youngest daughter doesn't like him? Qi Heiran said with a smile, when will my Daki generals look at a Miao village? It's good if it can be done, but if it can't be done, as long as Lu Dehe keeps his heart, I will still favor him. In the final analysis, the marriage with the Miao village is just icing on the cake, and how the army should operate is still how it should operate. I have sent someone to invite Chief Jian, and he has promised to come to the barracks as a guest tomorrow. You can stay tomorrow too. We want to talk about planting herbs. Fan Zijin was surprised. Prefect Lu is also here. This planting of herbs is a local government affair, so naturally Lu Qing should preside over it. Qi Heiran smiled and said, naturally, otherwise, why should I invite Jian over here? This time, Qi Heiran invited Jian's family, even the female relatives. If he was Han, he would definitely refuse, because how can a woman go to the military camp as a guest? The Miao people are not so particular, and the youngest daughter Jinhua kept clamoring to go out to play, so Chief Jian reluctantly agreed, but asked his wife Alu and eldest daughter Hanlin to take care of the youngest daughter so that she would not cause trouble. Mu Yangling also went out early to pick up Mrs. Lu to go to the military camp. Xiao Xia didn't go this time because she was not feeling well and she didn't want to go to a place like the military camp. As the hosts, they received the chief at the gate of the barracks, and in an instant, men and women walked into the barracks. Chief Jian was very interested in Qi Heiran's military training. He couldn't help but stop when he passed the school grounds. Qi Heiran took advantage of the opportunity and invited him, Chief Jian, do you want to go and have a look? Okay. Chief Jian walked towards the school field with a smile. Jinhua looked around excitedly, and Mu Yangling asked everyone. They went to the school grounds to watch the soldiers practice. Should we go to the tent, or follow? Just when Han Lan wanted to go to the tent, Jinhua quickly said, let's go and have a look. Jinhua raised her head and said, it is said that the soldiers led by the prince are very powerful, and they beat Xixia soldiers to pieces. I really want to see if there are any soldiers how powerful. Mu Yangling nodded with a smile, then let's go and have a look together. Seeing her younger sister's excited look, and seeing Lu Shinyang's smiling expression, Han Lan thought that this was normal among Han people, so she felt relieved and followed them to the school grounds. Just after stopping for a while on the school field, Lu Dehe noticed them coming, and instantly clamped his legs, raised his chest and retracted his abdomen. He thought for a while, and said to General Su, who walked off the stage, "General Su, I see you didn't seem to be doing very well just now. This time I brought a person from the general banner, do you want to compare?" General Su Shen was displeased, and was about to sneer, when he looked up and saw Chi Heiran coming this way. He snorted coldly in his heart, thinking that Lu Dehe wanted to show himself in front of the prince, so he said, "Of course it's no problem, it's just that this is a Chinese Ying, I'm afraid that Lu Shen will say that I'm cheating afterward." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 639. A cold light flashed in Lu Dehe's eyes, and he said with a smile, "General Su Shen is too polite, he is also under the prince, although he is divided into 3 battalions, he is a family, how can there be any way to talk about it? In this case, how about we fight with a general flag?" Lu Dehe responded with a smile, and it was time for him to show off his demeanor. As soon as Chi Heiran and the others arrived, the two of them had a discussion, and they came together to ask for orders. Chi Heiran glanced at Lu Dehe, smiled and nodded in agreement, then turned to Chief Jian and said, "Just let the chief give some advice." Where, Chief Jian said with a smile, "I should ask the 2 generals for advice." Lu Dehe got on his horse and stepped forward to sweep the formation himself. Su Shen twitched his eyebrows and cursed inwardly. This person is too stupid to go forward to sweep the formation himself. He still wants to hold a flag and command woolen cloth. General Su had no choice but to ask someone to bring his horse. Jinhua used to watch boys wrestling and fighting in the Miao village, but she had never seen such a formation before, so she immediately watched with bright eyes. Lu Dehe is the general of Xieying, and he has a good relationship with Chi Heiran, so Chi Heiran was able to trust Xieying to him. He reciprocated. Chi Heiran naturally carried out the training plan formulated by Chi Heiran with all his strength, so unlike the sloppy middle camp, the soldiers in the west camp fought well, not only the overall ability, but also the individual combat ability. Before coming, these soldiers were notified that they came this time to help the general snatch his wife, and this alone was enough for them to do their best for the general. Encountering some ignorant and undisciplined soldiers in the middle battalion, it is really a quarter of an hour to knock people down. What worries the soldiers is how they can highlight the general's bravery on the premise of winning. Soon, they won't have to worry because their generals will take care of themselves. Lu Dehe originally wanted to make a quick decision. After all, General Su is not weak, and it would be ugly if he loses. As a result, the 2 generals matched up, and Lu Dehe was shocked. He did not expect to see each other in a few months. The general is born to such a degree. He knew the truth of the insider looking at the doorway and the outsider watching the excitement, so he abruptly removed the knife that had been cut by 2 points. General Su Shen was not dismounted by him, and he managed to save face, which also made Lu Dehe more gorgeous moves can be used. General Su Shen's face turned pale, and then he looked at Lu Dehe, a little confused about his intentions. If he wanted to show himself in front of the general, wouldn't it be more revealing to knock him off the horse within 3 moves? Now there are colleagues who love to help him. However, when did Lu Dehe become so powerful? I remember that the 2 of them sparred a few months ago, and they couldn't tell the winner if they played 100 moves. Lu Dehe didn't give General Su time to think about it. Although his moves were gorgeous, they were also powerful. He just changed the fatality of the knife to attack some insignificant places of him. Jinhua's blood boiled with excitement, and she kept clapping her hands. Shinyang Lu also thought it looked good, and held her breath involuntarily. Mu Yangling couldn't help but pursed her lips and smiled when she saw it, while Chi Heiran glanced at Chief Jian with a straight face, and scolded Lu Dehe inwardly, Thinking that he was too handsome, his eyes after blinking, she winked at him to let him know that not only Jinhua, an outsider, but also Chief Jian, who may be his future husband-in-law, is not an outsider. Chief Jian thought it was Chi Heiran's arrangement. At first, he thought it was unnecessary, because he also saw that General Lu could defeat General Su within 3 moves, but he dragged him for more than 40 years. However, when he saw the two generals fighting and taking the cavalry behind them, Chief Jian was thoughtful. Did the prince want him to see the strength of their cavalry, and the emphasis was on the soldiers, not the generals? Also, although fighting depends on the orders of the generals, soldiers can order and prohibit them, and they can deploy quickly, which is also a great strength, and the generals of Daki have all experienced wars, so their ability is naturally not a problem. Thinking of this, Chief Jian carefully watched the confrontation between the two armies, and sighed for a while. The general's soldiers and horses are really good. Chi Heiran gritted his teeth and said modestly, "Where, the people led by General Lu Shen are not bad, they are ordinary soldiers who performed well in the western camp, but the soldiers led by General Su are the worst soldiers in the middle camp, so that they can see what a pass is, so as not to know how to get kicked out of the barracks. Not the last time, the soldiers who trained for 10 days can catch up with the soldiers who have been trained for more than 3 months. It is really a waste of his time. It's just that ordinary soldiers can be so uniform and quick to adapt. It's almost as soon as General Lu can issue an order, and they can immediately change formations and intersperse them. Show Lu Shenjiang's strength on this side." The more Chief Jian watched, the more surprised he became. I don't know if it was a coincidence or on purpose, although the soldiers led by General Su Shen were poor, but they happened to be above the soldiers of his Miao village. Chief Jian himself is a leader of the army, and he can't help but compare it with his own soldiers when watching. In this comparison, he can't compare the combat ability of individual soldiers for the time being, but the overall confrontation ability is based on the existing strength of their Miao village. Weaponry and combat awareness, I'm afraid they can be evenly matched with the generals of the Soviet Union. Thinking about it this way, he felt more and more that it was just arranged by Chi Heiran on purpose, but the last time Chi Heiran came here, he only saw the soldiers of his Miao village from a distance. How could he know their strength? Just thinking about it, Chief Jian's heart trembled. Could it be that the prince has been able to find out the confidential information about their Miao village? The prince's move is to warn him to be loyal to Daki, otherwise they will not be afraid of fighting. After all, the soldiers led by their weaker Soviet generals were slightly stronger than their Miao soldiers. Chief Jian was sweating coldly, and felt that dealing with Han people was troublesome, so he had to think more. Little did he know that it was all because of his own overthinking. Chi Heiran just wanted to be a matchmaker. At this time, he was looking at General Su's performance, and he was gnashing his teeth in his heart. He planned to double his training after today, and then glared at Lu Dehe, telling him to stop in moderation. General Lu can guess that it was almost done, so he finally shouted and knocked General Su off his horse. General Lu Can rode forward on his horse, clasped his fists with a solemn face and said, "The last general is lucky to live up to his fate." Jinhua cheered at the moment Lu Shen was about to win, clapped her hands vigorously, stared at Lu Dehe seriously with her red face, and when Lu Dehe stepped forward to say those words with a solemn face, her face flushed deeper, with water in his eyes. He looked at him with fists clenched. Mu Yangling turned around with a smile and wanted to ask her about her afterview, but she couldn't help being taken aback when she saw her expression. She looked hesitantly at the white-robed Captain Zhong Xiaoyi who was waiting beside him. Not this white-faced and beardless captain, but the dark and bulky Lu Dehe. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 640. Just when Mu Yangling was doubtful, Chi Heiran directly reached out and ordered the 6 people he had chosen to accompany him. Except for Lu Dehe who stepped forward excitedly, the other 5 walked slowly. Chi Heiran just glared at them. Grandma, if you don't want to, just say, is it possible that he can still force them to get married? If he said it earlier, he could have replaced him earlier. He looked at Lu Dehei, the only one who was willing, and was very worried. With his appearance and age, if he had known earlier, he would not engage in the so-called fairness. There are 2 people in 1 battalion. Just choose more and draw over those who are suitable. Jinhua stole a glance at Lu Dehei, then leaned into Mu Yangling's ear and asked, who was that De Haitan who commanded the army just now? Mu Yangling glanced at Lu Dehei, and asked her with his eyes, are you talking about him? He is General Lu Shen, a fierce general under the prince. Jinhua blushed, and asked in a low voice, is he married? She always remembered what Mu Yangling said, if she wanted to marry, she had to choose a man without a wife. Mu Yangling felt very strange in his heart, shook his head, and said in a low voice, he used to be poor and couldn't find a suitable one, so he didn't get married. Satisfied, Jinhua happily jumped to her sister's side, holding her hand and walking behind her father. Han Lan looked at her excitedly suspiciously, and asked, what did you say to the princess just now? Nothing, Jinhua pouted. She didn't want to tell her sister, she was an old pedant, and she would definitely object to what she wanted to do. A group of people moved to the middle tent, and an open space in front was cleared out. It is probably because there are female relatives, and now the cold wind is getting heavier, so they put curtains on both sides to block the wind. 2 fires were lit on the left and right sides, and half-roasted sheep hung on them. Chief Jian shrugged his nose and said happily, is this a prairie sheep from Lugos? Chi Heiran sat down cross-legged, and said, exactly, it's almost the Chinese New Year. I asked someone to go to Lugos to collect some sheep and bring them back. They can be slaughtered during the Chinese New Year. The weather is fine today, so I asked someone to slaughter too. If Chief Jian I like it, I will take both of you back. Chief Jian did not refuse, and responded with a smile. The man and the woman sat separately, but Jinhua, who looked at the handsome Sun Lang, didn't like to sit on the side of the female relative, so she ran to sit next to her father and stared blankly at Lu Dehei's side. Lu Dehei happened to be sitting next to Captain Zhong, and when he noticed Jinhua's gaze, his back tensed up. He didn't know whether Jinhua was looking at him or Captain Zhong. He regretted it for a moment. He should have been careful when choosing the seat just now, so he sat next to Captain Zhong. Among the 6 of them, Captain Zhong was the youngest. And the most handsome. Little did he know that Captain Zhong was also sitting on pins and needles. He felt that Jinhua was looking at him, and he regretted it for a while. He shouldn't have refused the prince's matter because he couldn't save face. The girl Jinhua ran over to the male guest. Sitting, it can be seen that there are no rules at all, and you are still staring at the man like this. Captain Zhong's face became more and more ugly, but the other 4 calmed down and decided to eat mutton with peace of mind and watch a good show. Mu Yangling smeared a layer of wild honey on the mutton, flipped it over, and cut off a thin layer with a knife. After a while, she cut a plate. She gave it to the chief's wife Alu first, and Alu hurriedly waved his hand and refused. Said in broken Chinese, I don't like honey. Mu Yangling smiled slightly, then you can do whatever you want. If you need seasoning, you can tell Xiaobing, and let Xiaobing get it. Aru smiled. Mu Yangling gave it to Mrs. Lu, who accepted it with a smile, looked at the little bear who was being carried by the nurse, and said with a smile, young master is awake, he must be hungry too. Mu Yangling reached out to take the child, let him sit next to him, and fed him some fruit juice first. Seeing him staring at the meat in front of him, he nodded his nose amusedly. This child is just like them. Master who doesn't like meat. Mu Yangling saw that his saliva was about to drop, so he took a handkerchief and stuffed it in his hand, and said, wipe the saliva, mother will help you barbecue. Little Seong didn't know that he was molested by his mother, so he wiped his mouth and nose with a handkerchief in his little hand. Han Lan on the opposite side laughed when he saw her, and Little Seong stared at her curiously with round eyes, and tilted his head to look at her. After staring at her for a while, I probably felt that she was not as attractive as meat, so I looked away again, and continued to look at the sheep hanging in front of my eyes. I saw my mother spread a layer of honey, grilled it, and it exudes a tempting smell of meat. The little bear drooled with a swish, and this time it was really drooling. The sliced meat was roasted tenderly, but Mu Yangling didn't dare to feed him more, so he only peeled off half a plate, and carefully fed him with chopsticks. After eating 2 bites of meat and 1 bite of juice, the little bear was full in a short while, and then continued to look eagerly at the sheep in front of him. Mu Yangling didn't dare to feed him any more, and couldn't bear his gaze, so he carried him to his father, and invited Jinhua. By the way, Miss Jinhua, we have wild honey here, and the roasted meat is tenderer than theirs. Do you want to come and have a taste? Jinhua was drooling at the man on the opposite side, and said without thinking, "What's so delicious about barbecue? It's not as interesting as a martial arts competition." Jinhua rolled her eyes and said, "Why don't you let them compete in martial arts?" Jinhua pointed to the man opposite and said, "This time my father also brought warriors, let them compete together to see who is better." Although Lu Dehe looked very powerful just now, but because the formation was the main thing, General Su didn't seem to be very strong, so it's better to compare again. Jinhua's proposal caught Lu Dehe's heart. He felt that he could not compare his appearance with others, but could only compare his inner beauty and ability. So he looked at Chi Heiran with piercing eyes, and Chi Heiran nodded in agreement. 6 people against 6 people, go together. In this way, everyone needs to fight together. The generals could distinguish between inside and outside, no matter what. They couldn't lose their status in front of the Miao people. Besides, except for Lu Dehe, no one really had the desire to show off. But the Miao people were not vegetarians either. After their entire army was wiped out, they pulled down the 4 of them, leaving only Lu Dehe and Zhong Xiaoyi on the field. Mu Yangling also looked at him with piercing eyes. After all, Lu Dehe had a few more years of food than Captain Zhong. What's more, when he was a gangster in the early years, he was cruel and ruthless, and he had a desire to express himself. Captain Zhong was forced to admit defeat. Chief Jian couldn't help sighing, and said, "My lord, you have a lot of fierce generals." Where, Chi Heiran said modestly without much sincerity, "The chief has many capable people under his command." Jinhua didn't hear the 2 of them talking at all, she was fully focused on the competition just now. She jumped up and said, "I want to compete too." Jinhua whipped her whip and ran to the front, shook it and said, "Who are you? Dare to come up?" The scene fell silent for a moment. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 641. Chi Heiran coughed lightly and looked at Chief Jian. Chief Jian was embarrassed and slightly angry, and shouted, "Jinhua, come back to me quickly." Jinhua pouted and said, "I don't." She pointed the whip at Mrs. Lu, "You come up and compete with me." Lu Dehe's expression was blank for a moment, and he shook his head repeatedly. Although he wanted to show in front of Jinhua, he didn't want to do anything to the woman. Jinhua was furious, and asked, "You look down on me? I'm afraid you can't compare to me, come up quickly." Han Lan hurriedly got up and said, "Sister, don't mess around, this is a military camp, you are a girl, how can you find someone to compete in martial arts?" "Why not? When I was in Miao village, I practiced my own soldiers, and my father didn't say anything." "You learned like a Han, but you thought I was like you." Seeing that her younger sister was targeting her like this, Han Lan was so angry that she was half dead, but because she couldn't embarrass her family members under the watchful eyes of everyone, she took a few steps, grabbed her hand, and whispered sneeringly in her ear, "I'm just afraid that you will lose, after crying, you are messing around in our Miao village. You are my father's daughter. Everyone will let you go. Everyone here is not used to you. If you want to avoid embarrassing your father, just follow me." Jinhua was even angrier. She never listened to persuasion. She shook off her sister's hand, just in time to see Mu Yangling stand up. She pointed at her and said, "I want to compete with you." Mu Yangling was stunned. She just saw that the atmosphere of the two sisters seemed to be in a bad mood, and she wanted to come forward to persuade her, so as to show her kindness to the landlord. Why did the fire come to her? Jinhua said, "Didn't you miss a hand in our Miao village last time? I think you are different from those Han women. Do you dare to come and compete?" A cold light flashed in Chi Heiran's eyes, and he was a little displeased with Jinhua, while Mu Yangling smiled and said, "It's not impossible, but you are not allowed to cry if you lose." Jinhua snorted coldly, and said, "I won't do that kind of dishonest thing. You choose your weapon." Because she came to the military camp, Mu Yangling didn't wear heavy clothes. She tied up her sleeves, asked Chi Heiran for a dagger and stepped forward. She raised the weapon in her hand and said with a smile, "I'll just use it. This is it." Jinhua frowned, "I use a long whip." "The long whip undoubtedly has the advantage over the dagger." Mu Yangling said, "The long whip only has a chance of winning when the distance is widened." "Are you sure you want to use the long whip?" Jinhua is best at long whips. She has never left her body since she was a child. Unlike Mu Yangling, who knows many weapons, she only knows this one. Mu Yangling stood opposite her and signaled Han Lan to let her go. Han Lan was sweating profusely and looked at her husband for help. She knew her sister's force value. What if the princess was broken? Chen Jiake glanced at Chi Heiran, seeing that although he was angry at first, he was not worried, and seemed to have confidence in the princess, so he secretly nodded to his wife. This sister-in-law often embarrasses her wife, and it would be good for an outsider to teach her a lesson. Almost when Mu Yangling signaled that it was time to start, Jinhua swung the whip over. Mu Yangling dodged deftly. The whip was thrown on the ground with a loud bang, and a mark was drawn on the ground. This is the first time for everyone. Faced with the fierceness of Miao Girl once, some people immediately felt sorry for them when they thought that they might marry this woman. On the contrary, Lu Dehai's eyes became brighter, and he looked at Jinhua with admiration. He is different from those men who only like delicate women. He thinks that a woman can only be called a woman if she can support half of a family. Otherwise, if a man dies, the family will only decline, and his wife and children may be poor. Use. It can't be eaten as a meal. It's better for Jinhua to be so tough. If one day he dies in battle, his wife and children can continue to live well. He doesn't mind whether he remarries or goes back to his mother's house. It is enough to keep the blood of his Lu family. Lu Dehai used the theory of pragmatism as always, and became more and more satisfied with Jinhua. Then he saw the princess dodging Jinhua's attacks one after another, but approaching her step by step, his heart skipped a beat. Seeing that Mu Yangling was so flexible, Jinhua simply turned half a circle, and the whip swept across. Mu Yangling turned over to avoid it, and switched the dagger in the air to his left hand. Pulling her closer, the dagger was on her neck. Mu Yangling smiled and said, "I took advantage of fighting with you. I am stronger than ordinary people." Jinhua was not convinced. "How big can it be? Is it bigger than my elder brothers?" Mu Yangling raised his eyebrows, looked at Ji Anyong who was gnawing meat below, and said with a smile, "You'll know if you try it." Chen Jiake poked the uncle with his finger, and Ji Anyong raised his head in a daze, unable to recover for a while. Chief Jian wanted to kick him into the fire. He turned his head to Chi Heiran and said with an embarrassed smile, The Lord laughed, I didn't expect the concubine to be so powerful. A joke, it's fine for the daughter to go up to the competition, but what's the matter with the son? Chi-Heiran smiled and said, it just so happens that I also want to see who is stronger, the young chief or my wife. There is no tradition in Miao village to look down on women, so Ji Anyong jumped up eager to try after hearing what Chi-Heiran said, and asked, is your strength also innate? Mu Yangling nodded with a smile. Ji Anyong drew a long knife, and said embarrassedly, I am used to using a knife. Mu Yangling threw the dagger to Chi-Heiran, drew a long knife as well, and said with a smile, then let's compare swords. Mu Yangling's sword technique is a combination of what she learned in her previous life and the knife technique taught to her by Chi-Heiran. It removes the fancy movements and is simple and neat. She has great strength and subconsciously restrained her strength by 5 points, but that's it. The sword collided at that time. Ji Anyong was still trembling slightly, and almost couldn't hold the knife. His eyes became serious, and he faced the battle more cautiously. Ji Anyong's sword technique was slowly practiced in their Miao village fighting with wild beasts and on the battlefield, and it was even more deadly. The two of them dang for a while had exchanged more than a dozen moves, and Chi-Heiran slowly sit up straight, lean forward slightly, and watch with piercing eyes. Chief Jian, on the other hand, was slightly startled, and straightened his back to look at the two people who retreated and advanced in the field. Ji Anyong was very familiar with his own set of saber techniques, so he had the upper hand when he came up, but Mu Yangling was not bad either. Although he retreated from time to time, he covered his whole body tightly, and could attack one or two from time to time. Ji Anyong originally thought that the longer the time, the greater his chances of winning. After all, he is a man, and his strength is far superior to that of Mu Yangling. Moreover, he is a person who has fought on the battlefield, and sometimes he fights with ruthlessness and experience. But I didn't expect that Mu Yangling was not weaker than him. Not only did she not lose her strength, but as time went by, it seemed that some memories in her body had been awakened. The sword technique became more and more fierce, and Ji Anyong stepped back. 3 steps. Ji Anyong knew that he should fight quickly, so the sword technique became more and more fierce. Mu Yangling hadn't fought so happily for a long time, and she lost her mind for a moment. She didn't react until she heard her son's loud cheers. She blocked Ji Anyong's attack, and at the same time, she jumped back and said with a smile, today is a happy day, so let's stop here. Ji Anyong felt a little pity, but he still accepted with a smile. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 642. The little bear clapped his little hands vigorously, yelled wow and rushed towards Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling picked him up and hugged him, and kissed his rosy face from excitement. Chi-Heiran got up and pulled the mother and son to sit beside him, turned his head and said bravely to Jian, you are good at martial arts. Ji Anyong smiled embarrassedly, the princess is amazing, she didn't seem to try her best just now. He was not a fool, Mu Yangling's attack was too balanced, as if he was controlling it by himself. Chi-Heiran laughed, and said, if the concubine tries her best, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist her strength. Now is the great Qi dynasty, Chi-Heiran doesn't want to cover up Mu Yangling's divine power anymore. The generals were secretly stunned, as if they understood why the princess was so favored. The competition just now shocked Lu Dehei and others, because they knew that they would not be able to survive under Mu Yangling without systematic education. 50 strokes. From then on, the general's awe of Mu Yangling reached a new height. Jinhua got to Mu Yangling's hand and said in a low voice, teach me later. Don't you just use a whip? I don't know how to use a whip. Jinhua felt a little regretful, she turned her head to look at Lu Dehei, and asked with a reddish face, hey, can you know how to whip? If you don't, you have to. Lu Dehei sat upright and said, I understand a little bit. Jinhua rolled her eyes, then you teach me, I want to learn how you Han people can whip, I want to see if it's yours or our Miao people's. Lu Dehe decided to find someone who knows how to whip when he goes back at night to teach him. Now everyone can see that Jinhua has taken a fancy to Lu Dehe. The generals who were also on a blind date felt a little uncomfortable. It would be fine if they lost to Captain Zhong, but how could they lose to a dark and old Lu Dehe? But at the same time of losing, I was a little lucky. Fortunately, this girl didn't have her eyes on me. Only Xiao Yi Zhong was in a bad mood. It was one thing for him to look down on Jinhua, but he didn't expect that Jinhua didn't like him either. Apart from his rank being inferior to Lu Dehe, he didn't think he was inferior to him in any aspect. Not to mention that he is only 21 this year. Given time, his rank will definitely not be lower than Lu Dehe. He glanced at Jinhua and felt that Miao girl not only had problems with her personality and morals, but also her eyes. Chi Heiran raised his head and happened to see Captain Zhong's glance, and felt a little displeased. A man should be able to afford it and let it go. Captain Zhong didn't like it and didn't dare to refuse it. He couldn't afford it? How can such a person be a general? The mind is too narrow. Chi Heiran looked at the other 5 generals again, and saw that Lu Dehe was so happy that his eyebrows and eyes were narrowed into slits. You don't need to look at this man. The other 4 have already started to drink and eat meat with each other shoulder to shoulder, and beat each other from time to time. Lu Dehe's shoulder in celebration. Chi Heiran nodded slightly. These 4 people are considered to be good talents. Chief Jian and his son-in-law looked at each other. He looked at Lu Dehe carefully, feeling a little dissatisfied. This man was several years older than his eldest son-in-law. How could Chang's daughter marry him? Chi Heiran dragged Chief Jian into the tent to discuss the matter of marriage. Chief Jian thought for a long time, and felt that if his Miao village could marry Han people, he should be able to get a lot of benefits. At least he can get more corn seeds. But the daughter is also very important. Chief Jian gritted his teeth and said, marriage is no problem, but that Lu Dehe is not. Chi Heiran said with a smile, don't worry, the chief, the marriage candidate is naturally up to you. For my sons and daughters, whoever is not married, you can choose. He heard Mu Yangling said that Jian loved his daughter. Yes, as long as Jian Jinhua takes a fancy to Lu Dehe, the matter will be considered a success. Chief Jian didn't know these twists and turns. His eyes lit up, and he asked, is this true? Chi Heiran nodded, waved his hands generously and said, if the chief wants, he can bring his daughter to the barracks often. There are many unmarried Hao Erlangs in our army. Chief Jian immediately smiled and said, Prince Chi, in fact, there are many unmarried girls in our Miao village. Chi Heiran chuckled, and said perfunctorily, as long as both parties are willing, I have no objection. It would be great if he could force his subordinates to marry the chief's daughter, but how could he force them to marry ordinary Miao girls? Fate. The 2 confirmed their intention to marry, and when they looked at each other, they felt that they were a family. Therefore, Chief Jian promised to protect the imperial court's policies with both hands and feet in the future, and organized the Miao people to plant medicinal materials, make a fortune, and be friendly to the Han people. Chi Heiran also said that he would provide some help to the Miao village. For example, the corn seeds in the spring will be close to each other. Friends of the Miao people learn advanced farming techniques. He even promised to provide technical and some material support for the difficulties encountered by the other party in building terraces. Similarly, Chief Jian will try his best to promote the great character of the emperor and let the Miao people know the benevolence of the emperor who loves the people like a son. Chief Jian felt that he had earned a lot of money. This prince seemed a little stupid in this regard. He paid so much just to let them promote their emperor. As for supporting the imperial court's policy, as long as the imperial court does not bully the Miao people, they will naturally support it. Isn't it all nonsense? He felt that he had paid nothing, and that he was very happy to get so much just by talking about it. After hearing his father-in-law's happy report, Chen Jiake was only silent for a moment, then nodded with a smile and said, "Prince Ji is indeed benevolent. But I was a little worried in my heart. If the Miao people all knew the Emperor Daki, would the chieftain be able to order the Miao people like waving his arms in the future? I want to dissuade them, but if the imperial court cannot get the benefits they want from the Miao village, will they still maintain such a good support policy? If it was as difficult as it was in the late Zhou dynasty, and the Miao people were exploited by the court, the power they held in their hands to instruct the Miao people was only to direct them to continue to fight against the court, and life might not be better than it is now. So, the options put in front of the chiefs are giving up the supremacy, benefiting all Hmong people, and continuing to make Hmong people live in dire straits, but we hold the life and death of all Hmong people in our hands." Seeing that his father-in-law didn't realize this, Chen Jiake turned his words around, thinking of his childhood dreams, thinking of his father-in-law's occasional expectant eyes. Chen Jiake suppressed what he wanted to say, thinking, maybe his father-in-law's original intention was not. However, he still wants Miao people to live a good life, so why let him make such a choice? Han Lan didn't notice anything unusual about her husband, but just told him about her sister's thoughts, and whispered, "Why did my sister choose such a dark and old one? I think the white-robed general next to him is not bad." Chen Jiake laughed and said, "This time you are not as smart as your sister. I think she made the right choice. General Lu Shen is much better than Captain Zhong."